Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Still Peaking. Today I have my dear friend Michelle Whang here, and we actually first met at an SF house party where she was at the time working on her company Tether, which is play kits for kids to connect with their cultural heritage. Tether has since shut down and she's now a PM at Nimble, which is the startup helping the hiring process for teachers be more accessible. So thank you so much for joining me, Michelle.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yes. So maybe let's just jump right into it. Before founding Tether, you were a PM at Visa, right? Was that your first official job?
Oh, yeah. It was my first job out of college. I was part of this APM, Associate Product Manager rotational program. And it was a 2-year rotational program at Visa for my first 2 years out of graduation.
Mm-hmm. And those are pretty competitive programs to get into, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that Visa's was, I mean, I got it. So I feel like actually in my senior year of college, I never imagined that I would go into tech. I always thought that I would probably stay around LA because that's where I grew up and do like marketing at an entertainment company or something. Mm-hmm. But off a whim, I decided to apply to a couple of tech rotational programs and Visa was the one that stuck. So yeah.
What ultimately made you decide to do the APM versus doing something, the marketing?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I thought it was a good foothold into the tech industry. I don't come from a technical background. So getting into any kind of tech I thought it would be a good foot in the door if I ever wanted to continue in tech. And also I wanted to go to the Bay. I wanted to go to SF. I thought SF is a beautiful city that I've always wanted to live in for a little bit. And if I wanted to come back to LA and work in entertainment, that is always open for me, I think. So,
and what was being, an APM and then ultimately a senior APM and then a PM at Visa like?
It was fine. So I was part of the very first cohort of Visa's rotational program.
Like the first APM they ever had. Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of knew going in that there would probably be some kinks with the program just because we're the first class, but I was down to take the gamble. And there was something like that appealed to me about the structure of a program as well, coming out of graduation, being surrounded with people like my age who are all kind of pursuing the same career path. I thought would be super fun. I think our first year we had some good structure. There were like every Wednesday we would have some kind of seminar or lessons to product management. And then that continued on for a couple months. And then we were assigned like mentors, peer mentors, as well as kind of like more senior mentors. So there was like a decent amount of structure. I would say that the structure began to fall through a little bit. Like in the second year, I think there wasn't as much mentorship as I would have liked. But by then, because I had the friendship and support of all my fellow cohort mates, it still ended up, I think, being the best decision for me.
They don't pair you with a more senior PM when you're working on projects?
Yeah. So there is a potential that you're paired with a senior PM. It just isn't like, it highly depends on whichever team you're on and who you're partnered with. I think the structure that the program gave us is that they gave us a peer mentor who was not a product manager, but worked adjacent with a product manager. So mine was like, my peer mentor turned out to be like a communications person in like another part of Visa. And my senior mentor was like senior product manager from another team. And we would meet up consistently throughout the 2 years.
Got it. Yeah, because being an APM and being a PM was, and I think still is, kind of a hot job that a lot of people want. So how did you feel when you were in that role? And at what point did you feel like, oh, this isn't enough, or I want something a little bit more in my job?
Yeah. It was definitely, like I said, it was really nice to be an APM, just to have like the rest of my class and cohort with me and to forge such strong friendships out of graduation. I think when I realized it wasn't working for me anymore is honestly, I think being an APM is great, but the industry that you're an APM in, or just a product manager in general, really matters. Being a PM at one company can look completely different from being a PM at another company. And I realized at Visa, not only was I not super passionate about payments. I know some people who are. I think payments can be a really interesting field to be in. It just wasn't for me. And also being a PM at a large corporate company, being an APM, it made me feel like a lot of the times that I was my manager's like assistant at times, rather than actually having the agency to make my own strategic decisions, to make my own roadmap. I was basically their bitch. And I was like, yeah, like this
like,
feels
I'm doing
bad.
bitch work.
Yeah, I'm doing bitch work. Like I'm making decks. Like I'm not doing anything of like super big value. This is work like an intern could be doing, versus like I knew that I could do so much more. And so I think it was probably around like the 2-year mark, like around when the program ended, that I started thinking about next steps and what I wanted to do after the program.
Did you ever express kind of those desires with your manager saying, I want to be challenged more, I want to take on more? And is that something that they could work with you on, or is that kind of just what everyone does?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough because the program, you go through 4 different rotations. So you're only on one team for 6 months. And so, you know, by the time you start getting ramped up or you feel like you have a good understanding of your product, you're probably already like 2-3 months in. And then like you can do good work for a little bit, maybe like a month or 2 before you start kind of transitioning off the team again. So it's a really like it's so quick that you don't really have the opportunity to make a ton of impact. I would chat with my managers every now and then, like, oh, is there any, you know, more direct work that I can do with designers or engineers? Like, I'd love to be more involved in this. But the scale that Visa is on, like one of the teams that I was on, you know, we were trying to launch a product in all international regions, right? Like SEMEA, like Asia Pacific, like they couldn't really trust, you know, an APM, rightfully so, to make strategic decisions for like a whole region. So the scale was just like on a whole nother level. So I totally get why, you know, it was the way it was, but it just wasn't for me.
Right. And then later when you became a PM, did you have more responsibility?
Slightly. I started being, you know, tugged into more strategic meetings, but the bureaucracy still kind of remained the same. It was an interesting one. I was an APM for 2 years, and then I was promoted to a senior APM. I was a senior APM for maybe like 6 to 9 months, something like that, before I got promoted to being a PM.
Is that a pretty normal track, or was that pretty quick?
I think it was pretty quick. Again, like it really depends on the manager you met, like after the rotational program. And my manager just happened to be very supportive and like a really big advocate for my work, which was so important. I know my much smarter peers who didn't get promoted as fast simply because they didn't have managers who advocated for them. So it really depended on the team that you were on and the manager you had. But yeah, it was pretty quick. And then I was a PM for another maybe like 6 months before I quit Visa as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Naturally then, you know, why'd you quit?
I quit because I was cooking. Like after the 2 years at Visa, after the 2-year mark, I started cooking and thinking about what I wanted to do after Visa. And I had this idea, and I had a really good friend. Her name is Meghana, and she was one of my closest friends in the APM program. And every time we would hang out, like every happy hour, every like random hangout, I would always like plugged her. I'd be like, hey, wouldn't it be really fun if we start something of our own?
What if we quit our jobs?
What if we quit our jobs? Just kidding. Only if you're serious.
Unless.
And I planted the seeds with her for probably like 9 months before she finally caved. She finally caved to my charms, and she was like, yeah, I'm down. Let's start something.
So you didn't know what you wanted to do yet. You just knew you wanted to start something with her.
Yeah. Well, I had an idea of what I was interested in. And from my experience, I've always tried to chase people in that, like, I wanted to make sure I secured a co-founder that was, you know, intelligent, passionate, driven, someone I trusted. And so when I chose Meghana, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I wasn't married to it by any means. I had like a couple of ideas of different areas, different ideas. And there were like maybe like 2 ideas where I was like, oh, I would really like to do this, but I want to hear what Meghana thinks first. It was kind of like a mixture, like a marriage of both, I think. Like I chose Meghana, and I had already thought of some ideas, but if Meghana also had some awesome ideas that I hadn't considered yet, I totally would have been down to go a different direction.
So you and Meghana quit at the same time?
Yes.
And at the time then, did you decide on an idea?
We did.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting because Meghana and I think we approached things a little differently in that I was a little bit more reckless, and I was like, let's just quit today. Like, we don't need an idea yet. Like, we can just, you know, figure it out as we go. And I think Meghana was like, no, like let's keep our jobs for a little bit. Let's work on this part-time. Let's nail down an idea. Let's nail down the need, the market size, like figure out a plan. And then once we feel like this is enough to take a gamble on, we can quit our jobs and go at it full time, which was a very reasonable way to go about things. So by the time Megan and I had quit, we had been working on Tether part-time for about a year. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me more about Tether.
Yeah, Tether is so near and dear to my heart. Our one-liner is that we help connect young kids and their families to their cultural heritage. And it was really born out of this idea that knowing yourself means knowing your culture. Knowing your culture leads you just to more general kind of happiness and self-fulfillment towards the rest of your life. I am like a second generation Korean American. My parents immigrated here when they were in their 20s. I grew up speaking, Korean at home and like English everywhere else. I wouldn't say I have a super unique story with like being an immigrant kid, but what I did realize is that in my 20s, and I think this is common, in my 20s and in college, I started to become really curious about my culture and really curious about my parents and how they grew up. And by really diving deep into that, I was able to really come to peace with my identity. And that's just a feeling that I wish for every, immigrant kid, Asian American kid as they grow up in this country. And so I think Meghana also felt the same way. She's Indian and Chinese American. So being like a mixed race, she had a different experience with that as well. So we wanted to kind of use our own experiences and use the ideas of what we wished we had as kids and create that for kids today.
So what was the actual format of helping kids connect with their cultural heritage?
Yeah. So the format that we landed on was a physical play kit or activity kit. In the activity kit, there is a variety of different items, like a children's. The play kit is designed around a specific theme. For example, we had like a Korean tether line, and one of the boxes was about the Korean flag and independence. And so we had a couple of items in there. We had a children's book around like Independence Day. We had like a small Korean flag for kids to play with. We had an educational booklet that we had worked together with a professor from SFSU, San Francisco, State University, State University, who majored in Korean studies. And I worked with that professor to help write that booklet in a kid-friendly educational way that's still fun.
Was that the first format that you guys thought of, or was it something that you guys iterated on a few times?
Yeah. Honestly, we did start off with the idea of a play kit. We tossed around a couple of ideas. We were like, oh, can we make like a fun card game for parents and kids to do together and have like intentional conversations? Can we do this? Can we do that? But ultimately, we really wanted to do like a physical good because there's something, I think, very meaningful about creating a physical space in your household with a parent and a child like sitting together and going through these activities together and carving out that time. So that is like a moment that we wanted to incorporate into families' lifestyles. So the physical good was very intentional. And then I think when we thought about it at the beginning, like something we got stuck on was like culture. What is culture, right? Culture can be so many different things. There's so many different facets to it. It can be food, it can be language, it can be history, it can be clothing. Because there's so many different parts of culture, if we're trying to connect kids to their culture, we need to introduce like different pieces of culture to them in bite-sized pieces. And with kids, like we need to make it engaging, we need to make it fun, we need to make it hands-on. And so I think the idea of a play kit or activity kit had always kind of been in the cards. It was just like what is the specific format in it and what are the specifically like different kinds of activities we wanted to include part that we iterated on over time.
Amazing. CPGs or consumer product goods are notoriously hard to do because sometimes the margins aren't very high. And then because you have a physical good, you have to deal with like manufacturing and supply chain and logistics and distribution. And you and Meghana, as first-time founders, first time at a startup and founding your own startup, what was that experience like having to learn everything, essentially?
It was not pretty. There were so many learning experiences about just like, honestly, the stupidest things. Like what kind of paper do we need to print like educational booklets on? How do we bind something? Trying to figure out shipping was like such a nightmare. On average, I think a lot of like packages cost $12 to ship like across the nation, or something insane, like $12 to $25. Like that was the range that we saw.
And how much was a play kit?
The play kit was like $20, right? I was like, the margins were not making sense.
Right.
And so I think there were just a ton of learnings about how to order things, how to time things, how to balance, like if we order in bulk, we can bring the costs down, but that also brings the risk up, the risk of just having a lot of inventory and not selling out. So balancing these different types of risks with CPGs, I think, can be really difficult. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. I think we learned a lot through mistakes, but it was very necessary to go through all that.
Where were they being made, and did you have to go out to the factories?
We basically, like, I designed everything in Canva. And
in Canva?
In Canva.
Were you a Canva Pro user?
Yeah, I was a Canva Pro user. I designed everything in Canva and Google Docs. And then we had a designer who worked with us to kind of design what the actual box design would look like. And then in terms of ordering the goods, yeah, we ordered online for a lot of like raw materials to come to us, and we assembled it ourselves.
Oh, so you made the play kit?
Yeah, in my living room.
You were the factory.
I was the factory. I was the factory. I was a factory worker. I was everything. So yeah, I have a lot of core memories of like me and my friends up in SF putting like an assembly line together and packing like a lot of boxes in one night, and me treating them to like pizza afterwards because that's all I could do and that's all I could afford at that time to treat them with. But yeah, it was fun times. But yeah.
That seems like a fun time. Just everyone sitting on the floor, working, and then having pizza afterwards.
Yeah. No, it was fun. It was fun. And yeah, my friends are awesome. But it was definitely a moment of just like, wait, we're very like high paid tech professionals. Like, what are we doing on a floor? Yeah. What are we doing? Like folding tissue paper this nicely and like trying to wrap these boxes. Right. But yeah, I mean, it was fun.
Yeah, that's so funny. Did you and Meghna ever, I mean, I feel like living in SF, all you hear about is like venture funding or venture-backed startups. Did you guys ever, raise money for Tether?
We tried. And that was actually the first thing that we tried to do when we went full-time on Tether. Because Megan and I both had runways for about a year.
Just like from your own savings?
From our own savings to cover kind of like basic needs, rent, whatever. But then after a year, it would start to get a little bit dicey. And so if we really wanted to pursue Tether, and Tether especially as a CPG where it's very capital intensive at the beginning to just like get all these materials out, we knew that we probably needed some help. And so it was a really odd time. Like it was right when the economy was starting to tank a little bit.
It was like 2020, 2021?
Yeah, beginning of 2021, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is when like tech layoffs were starting to happen. And it was kind of a scary time. A lot of investors were drawing out of risky investment decisions at the time, much less like no one was trying to meet with these like new founders who like they're first time founders, So I think we did manage to get a couple of conversations. The good thing about Tether is that it's a very niche product. It's, for young kids, it's for Asian Americans, it's about culture, it's a CPG. So the investors that are interested in those industries and sectors were few. There were just a few, and it's such a niche that it was easy to reach out to the ones who might be interested. But when we had a conversation with them, it was a hard sell. It was a hard sell to them about like the potential of this product, simply because like the main driver for me and Meghna to do this product was based off of like personal experience, like anecdotal experience, rather than a lot of data. So I can see now like why investors thought it was so risky back then. Right. So we tried to raise funding. We did not succeed. And we actually ended up bootstrapping at the end of the day.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
How much did you and Meghna like invest into Tether yourselves?
It's a good question. I'd definitely say, I think like up to 10,000 for each of us. So looking back, it was not a crazy investment, but it certainly felt like it at the time. We were just like, money's just like slipping out of our fingers. And 10,000 as in, it's not counting like our living costs or anything like that.
And you weren't paying yourself.
We weren't paying ourselves. It's just like the money that we pulled into keeping Tether running.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So it's like every day you're spending money on rent, you're spending money on living, the company.
Yeah.
Anything else that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like if I did this, my parents would freak out immediately. How did your parents react to you, starting your own company, quitting your great job at Visa, big corporate job?
There was definitely some initial pushback, obviously, because out of genuine worry. And they're like, you have such a good job. Like, why would you quit it? You should just stay there for the next 20 years. And I'm like, that's not how the world works these days, mom and dad. But eventually, it was actually a much easier sell than I anticipated, to be honest. And I think the reason for that is because I think there's probably two main reasons. Reason number one is my dad himself is an entrepreneur. He's a small business owner. My whole life, he like ran a car wash, and now he's running a mochi donut shop called Mochi Nut out in Chino Hills.
Mochi Nut in Chino Hills.
Mochi Nut in Chino Hills. And it just like knows what it's like knows what the entrepreneur life is like. And
did he ever work for someone else, or has he always just been like, can't work for other people?
Yeah, like my whole life, he's never worked for another person. I think maybe ever since he's immigrated over here, he's always been an entrepreneur. I think because we had that mutual understanding of what that lifestyle looks like, he wasn't super against it. He was like, just do what your heart desires, which leads me into like the reason number two is that I think growing up, I had always been a relatively good kid. I never took like a ton of risks. I never did dangerous things. Like if I ever did something, I always had a good reason for it. And so I think I developed a lot of trust with my parents in that regards. Like they never had to ask me about my grades. Like it was very much like if I didn't get good grades, I would blame myself. Like I was very much like held myself to a high standard. And so I think that when I came to my parents, it wasn't like hey, I'm just going to quit my job and I'm going to do this. It was like, hey, mom and dad, I've thought about this for a year. Like I've been working on this idea. I think it has a lot of potential. I'm working on it with a friend. I have ideas for how to grow this. I am planning on quitting my job and working on this for a year. If I don't meet these success metrics, then I'll go back and find a job. You know, it was very like I had a plan and I explained like my thinking as to why I was doing this. And my parents just agreed. They were like, you've never given us any trouble before. Like, I'm sure you have a good reason for wanting to do this. So yeah, I think it was not as hard of a sell as I expected. And they were very understanding.
That's amazing. And I'm sure it must have meant a lot too.
Yeah, it meant a ton. I remember the very first market that we sold Tether boxes at. It was actually in LA. And my parents came to support, and they bought like 3 boxes. And my dad just slips me like a $100 bill, and he's like, "Good work." And you know, it's very like symbolic, right? I was like, this is very full circle. Mm-hmm. I'm working on a product that's designed to help bring families closer together through culture. And here my family is supporting me at the very first market that I'm selling Tether boxes at. So definitely made me a little emotional at the time. It was very nice.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so sweet too. Yeah. And so you mentioned success metrics. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. How did you and Magna, I mean, you had a runway of about a year, mm-hmm. which I'm sure you probably discussed when you started it, but how did you think about success and growth and progress month over month?
Great question. Megan and I are both product managers. And so we both came in with a very structured way of thinking. We were like, what's our roadmap? Like, what is, the success metrics that we want to hit like every couple months? But I think what we quickly realized is I think a lot of people say that product managers make some of the best founders. I don't think a lot of people talk about why product managers might not be good founders. And the reason why I bring this up is that I think Megan and I both had such structured ways of looking at things that it never goes according to plan. Like when you're doing your own business, when you're starting something from scratch, any success metrics that we had, we were kind of like pulling out of our asses. And if we didn't meet those success metrics, it felt really bad, but it was also like, man, it's our first time doing this. Like, should we just like forgive ourselves and move on? Like there was a lot of uncertainty about like the right way to go about things versus like in product management, there's always some kind of framework to think about things, to prioritize. There's always kind of like not like a right answer, but like something that
like it's been done before. We know like if we hit this, it's going to be good sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when we first started, we had laid out a rough roadmap, right? Like we wanted to spend the first couple months. Like I was really focused on reaching out to investors. Megan was going to focus more on the product development and kind of getting the company set up. We were going to apply some startup accelerators. Those 3 months actually turned into 6 months. And
because things go wrong.
Things go wrong. No one was responding to us. The economy had tanked. We were just like, oh shoot, like nothing is going according to plan.
Yeah.
At the end of the 6-month mark, I was like, dude, I don't think we're going to get any funding. I think we need to make a decision here if we're going to bootstrap it or not. And if we bootstrap it, we need to make another roadmap because the one we had made before isn't going to work.
You're like, we're already 3 months behind schedule.
Yeah, we're already 3 months behind schedule. And our savings account is dwindling each month. And so I think when we made the decision to bootstrap, then we started to change our strategy. And this is actually one of the things that I reflect a lot about. When we decided to bootstrap, we were really conscious about money, obviously, because we only had about 6 months left of runway at that point. And if we were going to bootstrap, that 6 months was probably going to shrink a little bit because we're spending our savings into Tether. So we began to structure some of our success metrics around how much revenue can we make? How many customers can we get? And I actually now like a year out of the experience, I kind of look back at that and I challenge like whether that was the right way to look at things. Of course, I think it's very important when you start a business that you have people that are willing to pay for your product. But to base your success off of how much revenue you're getting each month is honestly like bound for failure. Like it's just like, you never know how those first few months are going to be. And so instead of basing your success metrics based off of revenue, basing your success metrics on learning goals like each month and proving different hypotheses right or wrong, I feel like would have maybe been a better approach back then. Because looking back, I think like 6 months in, we were just like, we want to get paying customers. Let's just create this MVP and like, let's try to find people to buy it. Instead of like going back and saying like, oh, we have all these assumptions about our customers. We have all these assumptions about this like problem that we're trying to solve.
Buy.
Yeah. And we were just like really fully, like we hadn't really tested those out. We hadn't really pressure tested those as much as we could have. And now looking back, I'm like, yeah, maybe instead of being so focused on our dwindling kind of runway, maybe it would have been better to be more focused on the learning milestones along the way.
So kind of more early stages, spend more time on experimenting and figuring out what exactly is the product that people want to buy.
Yeah.
And then like eventually down the road, once you have like that product market fit or really figure it out, then you go out and do the sales.
Yeah. Basically, how can we be as lean as possible? And that was something that we struggled with a lot because not only is Tether a CPG, but it's also a play kit that has a bunch of different items in it. It's not just like one item. We had maybe like 5 or 6 items in each box. And acquiring or like putting together these items took a lot of time, took a lot of money. And looking back, like there's almost this like fear of like, if you put a shitty product out into the market, it reflects poorly on yourself. Like if your friends or family see this product, it can be kind of embarrassing because you're like, you know, I can do better than this, right?
Right.
But really like conquering that fear and being like, it's okay to put shitty products out in the market. Like that's what an MVP is for, right? Like this is not the final product. This is not the final form. This is just one iteration, like, and we're continuing to make improvements along the way. And so really the Tetherbox MVP, I think, was way too fleshed out. Actually, looking back, like it was a very polished like MVP. And I wonder if we could have been a bit more lean about what MVP looks like and not have added so many items or, you know, spent so much money on developing it out and instead focus that time and effort on proving hypotheses wrong or finding like early adopters who would work with us and stuff like that.
So kind of quantity over quality.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think it's something that I feel like, because like content creators or I guess founders maybe have this in common where like when you're in the midst of becoming something great, you have to be something shitty first.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And there's like this like cringe hill that you have to climb because when you start, you're going to be really bad at it because you've never done it before. And it's like, you know, some people are laughing behind your back or like, oh, look at this like terrible thing or like how embarrassing for them.
Yeah.
But you got to just kind of like embrace and be like, I'm in the middle of manifesting.
Yes.
And it's going to get better.
No, exactly. It was for me, it's like a fear of being perceived almost. I was like, people don't perceive me. I just want to like work on this in private. Like, I don't want to share any failures if it happens. I only want to share the successes. And so inevitably, like, you know, we had a Kickstarter at first to raise at least like a little bit of capital for Tether, like a friends and family round.
How did that go?
And it went great. Like we smashed our goal out of the park. Our friends and family were so supportive, but man, posting about like a friends and family Kickstarter, asking for money from my friends and family to fund an idea I did not know would succeed took a different level of guts, I think, for me. It's really hard for me to ask for help in general in like other parts of my life. And so to ask for help and money from people I really care about to bet on me was a very uncomfortable feeling.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. Because then you feel responsible for their investment.
Exactly. Exactly. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of eyes, like through people's best intentions. Like they keep checking in. They're like, how's it going? Like, yeah, people have really good intentions. But that's another thing I found out as a founder. Like everyone has ideas about your business and like what you can do with it. And it's your job as a founder to like filter that out and like thank everyone for their input, but ultimately like keep the ship sailing in the direction it needs to go. So,
yeah. And kind of on that note, what do you think was one of the hardest things about building a company or building Tether?
The hardest part, man, there were a lot of hard parts. I think
that people might not expect, perhaps.
When you're starting a company, and I think this is pretty universal across any startup or founder experience, but you're really wading in a vast, large sea. Like there are lots of articles and information out there, but it's your job as a founder to parse through and find like the specific things related to your idea or your startup and construct a story out of it to convince people why this is a good product, why this is a good idea, why this is so disruptive. And for me, there was like something a little like morally or ethically like it bugged me a little bit because I was like, oh, like there's all this data to show that an idea like this could succeed. But if I dig a little more, there's also an equal amount of data that shows like why this wouldn't succeed. But I cherry pick like the things that are most applicable to the success of my business and my startup. And soon enough, it felt like I had to say it like 1,000 times for me myself to believe in the idea, if that makes sense.
Right. Because there's so many reasons and so many factors on like why it won't work.
Yeah.
You have to kind of like stay delusional so that you can keep going.
Staying delulu is the salulu.
Yeah.
I think it was exactly like that. I try to be like a more logical and rational person. And so crossing that bridge of like, I need to be the biggest fan of my own product. I need to not like blindly, but like single-mindedly like move forward and believe that this is going to work. That was really hard. That was really hard for me.
And at what point did you and Meghna decide, okay, this just isn't going to work?
So we had probably worked on Tether full time for a year-ish. And Megan and I, like I said before, we're really good friends, like on a personal level. As business partners, we found out that we had, a lot of differences in our work styles and our leadership styles. And our business working relationship started to like fissure a little bit over the year that we were working together. I think that my co-founder's relationship to work looks a bit different from like my relationship to work. I think she likes stability. I think she likes mentorship from like people more experienced than she is. And being in a startup environment where you don't have any of that. She burned out really quickly. And so mental health became like a topic of discussion between us. Sometimes, she'd go off the radar for a couple of weeks at a time to kind of like get herself together and like come back and join me. And I think like those instances were happening more and more often, probably around like the 9 or 10 month mark. And that's when we started to have a lot of discussions, like a lot of long discussions, hard discussions about, hey, like, you doing okay? Is this something that you still want to be doing? I think we had a lot of like vulnerable conversations of like, we're really good friends and we wanted to do this together, but like, honestly, this is really hard on me and all of that. And as a friend, of course, I'm like, please like take all the time you need. Like your mental health is so important to me. But as a business partner, I was like, but every time you go away for a few weeks, it's just me like working on this. And that's really hard on me too, right. to kind of like, for lack of a better phrase, is like to pick up the slack, right? Which sounds so cutthroat, but it is kind of the way it is if it's just two people working on something. Yeah. So I think we were getting to the 1 year mark and there was a big decision point. It was holiday season. Holiday season was coming up and holiday season is notoriously known across like all CPG products. This is when you make like, and it like a lot of your year's revenue. We had heard statistics from other founders in similar industries. They were like, yeah, we made like 80% of our yearly revenue between like October to December.
Like gifting season.
Yeah,
it's
gifting
Black
season,
Friday.
Black Friday. Exactly. And so people are just like more generous. Like, and so we were just like, this is our opportunity to kind of like reach the success metrics that we had initially decided upon. And so we did this big push. We like did this professional photo shoot. I set up all this like equipment in my apartment. I got my partner who's like a photographer to come in and take all the photos. We really like revamped our website. But what actually ended up happening is that we did all these things, but the last push didn't really happen. As in like, we were supposed to run some ads. We were supposed to like film a lot of social media content to like get people to the website to buy the boxes. But I think that part fell through because we were just running out of steam. I think we were running out of steam. We were running out of motivation. And that's when I basically had my like one of the biggest conversations I've had with my co-founder. I was like, hey, this was our shot and we missed it. This was our last shot before our year mark. I think that's when we had to seriously consider, we're like, yeah, I don't think this makes much sense to continue on anymore. We lost our opportunity. A holiday season is already well underway. And if we couldn't pull this off, if we couldn't pull off like a holiday drop, like the upcoming obstacles would just be like too hard for us to bear. So I think we had a serious conversation and we were both like, okay, like let's just go job search for a little bit. Let's see what happens. We can work on Tether like part-time while we job search. I ended up finding a job in the new year. And then my co-founder just wanted to take some time off like from work in general. And I think pretty gradually Tether started to sizzle away a little bit, which is like, it is what it is. It was definitely like a little bit sad to see the idea just kind of fizzle away, but it was for the best, I think.
Yeah. Did you ever blame your co-founder for did you ever think like after it ended, did you think like, oh, if she was like more present or anything else, like maybe we could have kept going? Or was there any sort of resentment?
I mean, truthfully, yes. When it all happened, it was a very like emotional time for me. But 6 months down the line, a year down the line, I have finally kind of stepped back from the incident enough to kind of look at it more logically. And at the end of the day, I feel like I'm just like, I take responsibility for all my actions. I was like, I chose her. I was like, this is my co-founder. And I feel like I probably kind of dragged her into all of this. And
maybe she's like, you did this to me.
Yeah, maybe.
My mental health is in shambles because you did this.
Actually though. And I think that there were a lot of times where I maybe like pushed harder than I should have, or I let my pride get in the way. From the very beginning, I think we had like some fissures when we were trying to decide the company structure. We were like, who's the CEO going to be? Which is like obviously always like a really awkward conversation.
So who was the CEO?
We couldn't really decide. And maybe that was the first like beige red flag. But for legal purposes, we did have to have someone be the CEO, and that was me. But in practice, and this is what we agreed on, we were like, we're equal, like 50-50, etc. Another learning moment though is I was like, that never works. Like you always need a decision maker. You always need it to be at least like 51-49. And the relationship between the co-founders has to be such that the one who is the decision maker has earned the trust of their other co-founder to make the final call. And I didn't do that. So I think ultimately, like logically looking back from it all now, I'm just like, it was so emotional at the time. And of course there were thoughts of like, man, like what would have looked like if I, had a different co-founder, or if I had just done this by myself. Like, of course there were so many what ifs, but rather than kind of getting buried in those types of thoughts, I feel like it's much more helpful to think about the things that I've learned, things that I was thankful for, and take those into my next experience if I have one.
Yeah, that's amazing. And now you do work at a startup.
I do. Yeah.
How has working at, Nimble colored your reflections on Tether in any way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So the place that I work at right now is probably like the perfect blend of my past like work experiences. It has all like the structure that I had at my corporate job before, but it has like I'm really passionate about the industry that I work in now. I'm really passionate about providing, kids in classrooms with the best quality teachers that they can get. And I work with really brilliant people who are very smart and very good at what they do. I work for a female CEO, which is very, very rare. And I think like over 50% of the startup is people of color. It's such a great working environment that combines the things that I loved the most about my past work experiences, which is really, really unique. Actually, right now, something that's like new with Nimble is that we have been exploring different areas to expand the company into. So I'm part of one of like the discovery groups into sizing the opportunity to seeing, how we can monetize this. And this experience has really given me, like, it echoes a lot of what Tether used to be like for me, except I'm working with people who are more senior than I am and who are smarter than I am, and seeing how they approach the unknown and like structure it, organize it, put together teams has been invaluable for me as I look back at Tether and I'm like, what could I have done better? They also remind me that there is like a thing called intuition. I think my intuition was shit like when I was doing Tether, honestly, like when I was younger, obviously. And intuition comes with time. It comes with age. It comes with maturity. And that's just not something that you can like learn. It's just something like learn like by yourself. It's something that you learn over time. So yeah, through Nimble, I'm kind of sharpening my intuition a little bit. I'm trying to learn from people that are way smarter than me. So
that's amazing. If there was one piece of advice you'd give to your past self or give to anyone who's trying to start a company for the first time, what would it be?
That's a good question.
Would you have done Tether again? Like knowing what you know now, at the time, would you have done Tether?
Yes, I definitely would have done Tether. I think the way that I would have approached it might be slightly different, but I think the experience of doing Tether and Tether's idea are not things that I would ever trade for anything. Like I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. What I would say is there are a couple of pieces of advice. I think number one is choose your co-founder well. I still stand by my decision for choosing my friend as my co-founder, but something that, a lot of people actually advised me about, but I ignored at the time was that, co-founders should have compatible and like different skill sets. Megan and I were both product managers and we came from very similar backgrounds. And so at the end of the day, like, it was almost like the blind leading the blind. Like, yeah, having someone who has a very different skill set is invaluable to building out the team for your business. There are questions that I would encourage any like founder to think about before they really take the plunge to do a business. Number one, like, why you? Like, why are you the best person to build this product? Why are you the best team to build this product? Number two is, why your product? Why do you think your product can succeed amongst like all of the other products in the market? What makes you so special? And if you can nail the questions to the answers to those two questions, I think you'll already be in really good shape. Those were the two questions I struggled with the most as I was talking with investors. And I was like, man, like I have no clue. But if you think about those questions and you have a good answer for them, then I think you're in good shape.
Right. And now that you know those questions and you've had founder experience, you've had startup experience, would you start your own company in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I think I would. If you asked me even just like 6 months ago, I might have said, I'm so burned out from Tether. Like
never again.
Never again. But I think recently, actually, like in the last couple months, I've been finally had some time to reflect a lot on my time with Tether. And it took me a while, but I feel a little bit more recovered after closing up Tether and closing up shop. It's a different kind of like hurt to close up a business, to basically dissolve your business and like take down the website, take down the social media. It's like it never existed.
Oh, yeah, that's so rough.
Even though it was like so much of your time and energy, it was like your entire heart.
Worse than a breakup?
Yeah, worse than a breakup. Way worse than a breakup, actually. It was so heartbreaking. And so it took me a while to recover from that. But I am now at a place in my life where I would be down to do something again if I come across an idea that really resonates with me.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Michelle, and hearing all about your experience with Tether and building it. And let us know if you ever start a new company.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. Thanks for being a great host.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
And if you want to connect with Michelle, you can find her on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and I'll drop all of her socials down in the bio section below. All right. Bye.
Bye.